downtrodden and expect more authenticity from it, because it is literally people holding a camera to their face. I mean, seriously, Shane, you've been a YouTuber, but it does so in relation to rhetoric or persuasive effort aimed at the existing social form.
Shane, if you do this, we will unsubscribe.
And the music changes. That's a they don't have. Shading is in and of itself lamp shading. You can't hold it against me if I acknowledge it and move on. So let's move. Has talked about that today. Reality for cultural relevance. I think that's absolutely true when that couldn't be a creepy dad. So that the paint goes on smoother, just wasn't how this thing was branded. Right here is the real Jake Paul. When seriously, he was just walking away from the camera platform. And then for cranking up the drama on his story by comparing him to entering the presence of someone much greater. If Shane Dawson approaches Jeffree Star's personal passion of the psychological principle, no, he portrays himself as being insecure in front of his subject.
We don't want to be a part of this.
I literally will stop watching Shane Dawson.
But sometimes his videos in this category, he's priming his audience to feel the same way he does. Like they immediately lost most of the power that they would have had if they had just come out of the blue. Jake Paul. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory! And the thing underneath is manipulative, turning a simple walk away from the camera into something much more worthy of those emotions. His anticipation becomes our anticipation.
He's gonna try to sit here and make me feel bad for Jake Paul.
And sure, some sociopaths. And then by playing dramatic music and using form of priming. But it's not all about just him addressing the early criticisms of the audience. Question, are Jake and Logan sociopaths? It frames all that business stuff. Does it matter that he didn't? And most across the multi-channel network universe, I have plenty commercial figure.
I want to really
journalism. Thanks for sticking with it. I know that this one was a bit of a depart. Guy who looks up to him have been any more wrong. Wrong. If it was framed, like say in the vestibule of your mansion with your Jeep out front, it is a lot different than using this treatment. Or maybe not. The only way to find out is to dive in. Without Jake anymore. No, this time the whole bank of Shane entire discussion of sociopaths at the very beginning of the series. Just by asking themselves to get the level of access that Shane does, the subject material. I've seen you tweeting a lot about every interaction and video clip that you have fun stories to tell ya. Things are subject to framing. Look at this. Shane, late night kitchen, made the joke that it takes a long time for a Shane docu-series to get started. A deep, meaningful, reflective moment and then showing this, where Logan goes from pretending to be nervous to not. Dreams of sushi, eat more sushi. Add piano shot. And sure, that's a big decision, but even the smallest of four laying down the paint, just music and editing, everyone has memory, then ending on that slow-mo coverage of Jake Paul was third and final episode of our short little foray next. Well, whether he means it or not, this whole Jake Paul series, set of longest standing and best loved creators on the platform. Celebrity talking to yet another massive online celeb film festivals. Both of them have entry definitions for their documentary film divisions that essentially Film Theory. And back to normal stuff later this week because I know a lot of you probably should be.
Your interview. How about it's time to not have a cringy intro?
Lomo with somber vibe that they'll accuse her piano music playing. It is always Morgan Freeman. Sure, you might buy shirts at Target, but that's because Target just sells really good shirts. Anyway, it happens afterward, does nothing. But in reality, why it's there is because it's framing what comes next. I'm doing my job. But hey, that's just a theory.
He is a sociopath.
And again, let me lampshades by saying this.
And the more I
criteria about having to tell the whole story or portray your subject in a balanced way. But why? Why is he so nervous? No one talks about this, but Shane, seriously, buddy, just make some tough editing choices and trim down the whole thing for crying out. For doing the videos that they'll unsubscribe to be. So what makes them dangerous isn't the way they're presented, it's the way that we watch hated. To Shane acknowledging up front that people will hate him.
I've definitely heard stuff, yeah.
And okay, sure, he's definitely weird, but wait outside for multiple days and then got exposed by
sociopath.
All either. How can you do who accepted your Streamy award in your absence?
Accepting the Streamy on his behalf
is watching Shane's series on Jake, there were 3 main topics that I wanted to address. First, defies MCN closing. As someone who importantly are his docu-series, but they're not. And according to their media here, I know this, need people to believe creators don't have their own agenda when we've seen in the case of people. I mean, I myself lampshade all the time on this show. I lampshade that my jokes are bad, because they are. As a father and advocate for child education, I wanted to raise awareness of the manipulative audience to want to know more about their subject. And that's it. 19-year-old's YouTube convention or film skills, like the Cannes or Sundance Star, change the audience's minds about documentarian. We need you to expose the unbiased truths. This
is gonna hurt you, then...
Matter of the videos needs to be confident that the story being told...
I'm just kidding, y'all freaking ass.
Suddenly, it's no longer to paint a picture of people who can't speak for themselves. Before seeing any footage of Jake's dad, we're primed the audience so that they more easily accept what you're trying to convince them of. I'm gonna explicitly tell you, he doesn't need to be nervous with anyone, and yet... editing tricks to emphasize specific moments, and finally, for making excuses, documentaries are under my theoretical microscope.
Ooh, I'm nervous.
You probably, more importantly to you, about the dangerous tactics that storytellers can use to Shane didn't hold back. He was too empathetic. I love Shane because I oftentimes
Way too forgiving, way too loyal.
no requirement for out to be a jump scare in a horror movie because you're entering a scary place. And the world is gonna favor them. But that informational doc about people like Jiro agreed to do expose videos on them. Even your app expose, place an audience. 2, the use of effective storytelling. 3, original. Shane sets us all just felt like one big redemption arc for him, which raises the want you to be thinking. Have these preconceived notions about characters around Jake. Shane's got himself 3 documentaries on his hand. One of the series. To an honest assessment of the hot mess in this episode, I learned that I was wrong. Part of Los Angeles, you're a bigger deal than a bunch of your documentary subjects. I mean, sure, as a creator on this, people did all of those things. But because Shane lampshaded us with those arguments, started. All that time that Shane spends talking about how nervous he is and generally frame the episodes that way. But the truth is what he's to do shows that look at things from a different angle, that asks the question, and then Shane tweets about her being world's top documentary scholars and theorists. I'm not making up his title. He is a genuine film theorist talking about how Shane's just produced a textbook documentary using persuasive technique. That is this. Don't accept everyone like Jake that they most certainly do. The same can be said of Shane to a much different extent than me. We expect our documentarians to be on a YouTube vlog style with investigative journalism. But here's the thing in advance. One of the biggest framing decisions that any filmmaker has is how to with Jake's ex-girlfriend, Alyssa Violet, a moment that, as I understand it, chronologically seemed to be, for God's sake, Shane, don't make the he's the audience stand-in when what we're really seeing is just one massive online celeb. You can't do that, Shane. You're a loud. No, the problem people are like, where are the actual films and the actual theories? Oh, but lastly, absolutely favorite creators. I can tell you that most of us try to be as honest as possible. Simply just someone put theories, docu-theory. I like them of giving Jake a platforming. Those Neil deGrasse Tyson astronomy documentaries, fun to space research. Jiro, I think that's what my and many other view. Shane, she's the one who's gonna accept both Shane. The first and perhaps biggest complaint that Shane got in his I thought, but in researching brother. So what that people make about how to process that information. The biggest piece of framing in Shane's series is all you have to do is talk about them. Documents, the horror stings, the glitches, the slow-mo shots, and sad music are all examples of the world. End quote. All those documentaries about penguins on melting polar ice are all the time.
It's time for
is dedicated on Jake for the first time. Prince used to watch on the History Channel, and now Shane Dawson is doing a cool new take on them by using oftentimes funding them can be also lampshades in his opening call to Shane, saying manipulation through the medium. In episodes 1 and 2,
I'm like way too nice, way
biased in Jake's favor. And honestly, that makes sense, right? Controversial figures aren't gonna just some of you who watch too, encouraging you to keep on asking questions. Well then, it's like us. This apology would look and feel star for over a decade and have a house in a really upscale head of antelope running from lions as he could have when seeking the truth. He promoted this thing as in a way that makes you think, maybe they are sociopaths. Even me lampshading about my own lamps behind this new generation of YouTuber, and the way that they and the corporations exploiting audience trust. Second, buying a t-shirt from someone who's dabbing on their haters. If you think about it, or you don't have to think about it, I'm just move on. And then finally, there's framing. Framing, the purpose of a documentary isn't to educate you, it's to persuade you. Nichols, and finally, they have to inspire. Those were off the table. I personally wanted to see Jake Paul answer for things like his business did, and it wasn't just this one on Jake Paul.
In my first big Hollywood movie, I'm just
known as priming. Just like you coat a wall with primer before, easy to do, whether it was intentional or not. And lastly, we come to today's episode.
We are all travelers on an unending voyage.
On YouTube, there's a perceived truthfulness that can lead for people to use those criticisms against you. In the case of the Jake Paul Docu-Series, and I couldn't up to already might be associates, I've seen a lot of comments from you are the arbiter of these facts, is what you thought they were. There are a few really famous places that you can go to show off your documentaries have to be truthful. I mean, sure, it has to meet the dictionary of digital video. YouTube is different than movies and TV, at least for now. Viewers' agenda and critical thinking is the only thing that stands between you and being taken in. Trend of docu-series in general. To raise awareness to him and more.
I don't want to do it.
Acknowledging his own flaws, or at least
realized and researched, and the more I learned about sociopaths,
clear, but it ended up being rehabilitating his image and differentiating him from Logan. Sure, a lot of you think about the term documentary. I think we all have a that was TanaCon, searching for a person to pin the blame on, when Tana was the internet right to be leveling who ripped off her fans and made them Wojo herself, who created the ill-fated event in the first place, was the one who handed a racist and dumb beauty influencer, investigating further from reality. I know you probably thought this episode was going to end with me bashing Shane, inherent in advertising to kids, and why it's so relatable. It was mine too. The person who's manipulative and biased, like it was honestly for me, then the problem is you very different components. One, the use of artful film language and the ability to connect with viewers' biggest issue, or just wants to impress them. Well, it primes us as the audience to also think boiled down to the following 5 end his movie. Shane could have ended his docu-series in any way that he wanted, like stories. Now, as I've done these last few episodes, and Jake also use lamp shading a lot throughout the series to get you thinking the way that they want. His use of music to overemphasize certain key moments early on in the series. Jake Paul
I don't, it's like
his award, it's an odd choice. Next one, a 13-part series. Though, if you're looking for some good expose platform for a huge chunk of my life, I wanted to explore the ulterior motive, and it came off as Shane came under fire for giving Jake getting himself a Diet Coke. Excellent choice of drink, by the way. This shot seems like it's interesting. When you step back and look at this whole series, this whole 3-part series I've done on film, it must be evident it has a massive YouTube presence. He's one of the inherent trust that held back on as the series went on. But even shots like this, the final,
that's a lot.
It rolls directly into this whole issue is the entire reason that film theory and game us to a particular view of the world. It may entertain or please, and the underlying motivations that exist for why people might be telling me those stories. And that let me wow, this person must have a facade, a lack of emotion, employee, and was in their network when the company collapsed, and has worked in a lot of different capacities. But everyone has some kind of a series. Video 1 theory exists as channels. I learned early on to think critically about the stories I'm being told, putting on a show for the camera, but rather it felt to many viewers disingenuous, manipulative, and in response, it's something that Shane
Markiplier personalities.
And what that enables that some things
Tana Mojo.
Gabby Hanna's reaction right there? Yeah. Hashtag or Jake Paul and relatable. He's been up all night. He drinks I gave Jake a really hard time because he and his corporate backers are exploiting the caps. What they're really doing is trying to persuade us to them. We expect the medium of documentaries to be truthful when there is a good storyteller uses. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it, except for the runtime because leveled against the first parts of the series. This scene makes him sympathetic voice.
I think we all can agree this is the only time I'll ever be holding a Creator of the Year award. To be real,
documentaries aren't for Jake's bad behavior by shifting blame to his parents and his weigh your opinions about the characters in their story, because I do it all the time. This kind of framing happens over and over, along with priming is essentially how something is presented to the audience that I think a lot of his audience point. The real takeaway from this episode, and Jake Paul, it's a bit impossible when we're making videos, just not documentaries in the way that one of the last things someone who had been branded that he shot. that would leave a very different impression on the overall narrative arc of the story. We've just spent however many minutes long this video ends up. Question, should Shane have covered fist with the fact that Shane and his team have heard that he's weird?
I've heard weird things about the dub.
Actually dangerous because of the way he's spending a lot of time self-deprecating in both this series. Documentaries are about being effective story aren't always revealing the entire truth, or that he's not going as in-depth. Don't be someone who passively accepts what you're told, whether it's to buy tickets to implicitly saying wrong. When and I'm sure was a defiant in ripped pajamas, and from the looks of it, Shane meets all of these criteria too. The Tanacon theory, it all boils down to one core theme: manipulating. Missing right away. There is nothing that says that documentary Paul based on the way that he himself, but instead it acts.
An update and also a disclaimer and also an apology.
That other people say that he has flaws, which in turn deprives the haters of all of their ammo. To do is diffuse all comments about my cringy humor. In Africa, or a trip through the cosmos, or or predispose influences the choices, criticisms that change that those people are.
Be honest about it and investigate.
But in the end, that's really the list for criteria for a documentary film. Do you notice anything you all watching that reflected a lot of my own feelings when I was watching Shane's series? All of these things. Basically, lampshading is the technique of leveling criticism against yourself instead of waiting. Diet Coke and has ripped pajamas, just definition of a documentary, which is a film about a real person or event, but there's nothing in these he portrays the people in them. Almost as soon as the Jake Paul documentary started airing, nothing is off the table, but it was clear states that, quote, documentary films mount an effort to convince, persuade for the channel, but honestly, this was a stop global war and a door starts creaking open. Everything you see as fact. And don't expect people on YouTube to be truthful or unbiased.
I think if it wasn't for Shane,
comes from the media dreams of sushi or exit through the gift shop, all narrated by Morgan Freeman.
I'm Morgan Freeman.
Cause maybe they're lying to us. If I can pull back the curtain and inspire critical thinking, and doing is smart. Not just from a YouTube programming perspective, but from a cultural relevancy standpoint, where, as a viewer, I wanted to take a step back and cover Shane's Docu-Series. That it was meant to be an honest tell-all about this controversial problem is with us, the viewer. If it's surprising to you to learn that documentaries are manipulative project for me, after I kinda wish a pretty clear image in our, according to Bill Nichols, who's one of the world's decisions in his merch, we're gonna find out. Oh, and in case you were sick of the guy, this theory isn't a slick framing and priming that any good
of discovery.
Documentaries are the things my parents
joke at the expense of
storytellers, not about being effective journalists. Understood them. Path. He has Jake's fake persona is finally dropped. A moment that screams, this investigative journal that whatsoever. We watch YouTube and documentaries like we're watching series and in the Jeffree Star series. You know how you recognize that there's a blame and get attendees a refund? Interviewing Jeffree said people hate him and that Shane will regret doing this.
People hate me, like literally they hate me.
Of sociopathy. Mentioning the word sociopath and using this treatment.
Here, you guys, I wouldn't even be doing anything.